Did an obscure writer from the 1890s predict the Trump presidency and even the name of his son, Barron? Certain artists and writers seem to have an uncanny ability to see the future, particularly as it relates to people and events that are set to loom large, very large, in human consciousness. In this video, we're going to look at some crazy examples of them doing just that. But this is an astrology channel, and there seems to be an astrological pattern at work underlying this weird phenomenon. And it tells us something interesting about how astrology and time itself actually work. So get ready for another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. Last month, we witnessed the inauguration of President Trump, who I think it's fair to say is the most famous man on earth right now, and probably has been for almost a decade now. But was the coming of both Donald Trump and his son Barron foreseen in the 1890s? Ingersoll Lockwood was a lawyer and writer who was born in New York in 1841. In 1889, he published a children's book called The Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and His Wonderful Dog, Bulger. And he followed it soon afterwards with another book entitled Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. In the book, Baron Trump is a rich kid who travels the world having adventures before returning home to the place he calls home, Castle Trump. Now, Baron Trump is a pretty unusual name, so it's already interesting that he shares the name of Donald Trump's son. Here's an illustration showing what little Baron is supposed to look like, and I don't know about you, but I can see some resemblance. Of course, these days, Baron Trump is anything but little. He's apparently at least 6'7", but you can't nail everything. Apparently, Donald Trump owned a casino called Castle Trump. And in the Lockwood books, Baron Trump is advised by a character named Don. What sends the weirdness into overdrive is the title and theme of another of Lockwood's books, The Last President. The Last President is a novella about a populist president who's elected in the United States and whose controversial election faces a lot of opposition. The president is from New York City, where Trump is from, and in the book, protesters march on a hotel on Fifth Avenue, where Trump Tower is located. Alas, the name of the president isn't Trump, it's Brian. But there is a character in Brian's cabinet named Pence, another pretty unusual name. Now, this has, of course, set the more imaginative parts of the internet into full-on schizoid conspiracy freakout mode. The Trumps must be time travelers. Or Ingersoll Lockwood was a time traveler. Or Lockwood was a member of an occult secret society that hatched plans in the 1890s to put a man named Don and his son Barron in the White House 120 years later. But I have another theory, and surprise, surprise, it has to do with astrology. A principle I always come back to over and over again in my astrology is how events at the time of conjunctions foreshadow and indeed predict the themes that the whole cycle they're initiating will be about. The 1890s were hugely important from an astrological perspective because they saw the last conjunctions of Pluto and Neptune, whose 500-year synodic cycle is the most powerful and defining in mundane astrology, in my humble opinion. And on this channel, I've covered extensively how the events that took place around that time set the stage for everything that's happened since then. Heavier than air flight, nuclear technology, computers, UFOs. The early traces of all these phenomena emerged in the 1890s and then in the 20th century transformed the world. This is how synodic cycles work. The word synod means meeting. It's as if the two planets meet and announce to the world what they plan to bring into it over the cycle at the time of their conjunction. But it seems that this doesn't only play out through the events that take place at the time. Some people, like artists, psychics, and spiritual leaders, seem to be able to tune into the energies of the moment, listen to what those planets are saying, and foresee what will come over the course of the cycle that's starting at that time. As the poet Ezra Pound once said, artists are the antennae of society. The Trump presidency has been a psychically massive event. It's generated extremely strong feelings, not just in America, but across the world. And it's something people have spent vast amounts of time and effort talking and thinking about. Could it be that in the 1890s, when all the potentialities of the 500-year cycle that was starting at that time were swirling around the zeitgeist, Ingersoll Lockwood unconsciously picked up on the future prominence of Donald and Barron Trump. We're all psychic to greater and lesser degrees, but Ingersoll Lockwood might just have been more psychic than most. But he's not the only writer who, knowingly or unknowingly, managed to predict the future in a published work of art. If you're enjoying this video so far, please do click the like button and let YouTube and me know that. And do consider subscribing if you want to make sure not to miss out on future episodes. You might also want to consider becoming a member of World Astrology Report, which gives you access to extended, ad-free versions of all my videos, including this one, and all my long-form live streams, including my 2025 forecast and my last stream on the end of the Kali Yuga. The next stream will be on the Age of Aquarius. We'll explore what the Age of Aquarius is and consider when it might be coming. You can purchase entry to the stream on the live streams page of my website, but entry is free for members and you can cancel at any time. Thanks for listening. Now on with the video. We've been talking a lot about the 1890s in this video and the Pluto-Neptune conjunctions that happened at that time. And there was more art from that time that foreshadowed events and people to come. First of all, let's turn to the Austrian painter Franz von Stuck, who painted this work called The Wild Chase in 1889, very close to the exact conjunction of Pluto and Neptune. This painting is supposed to depict the Norse god Wotan on horseback leading a procession of the dead. Like Mercury, Wotan is a psychopomp. And if you look closely at Wotan, you might agree that he looks uncannily like a certain Adolf Hitler. As I discussed in this video, Carl Jung himself thought that the Nazi movement represented the unleashing of the spirit of Wotan within the Germanic-speaking peoples. So it seems that von Stuck is yet another of the artists we've been talking about, who can somehow pick up on the potentialities of the cycle that's being initiated at the time that planets form conjunctions, and in particular envision the people that will play major roles. Now, another of the most famous artists of this period was the writer H.G. Wells. Wells, along with Jules Verne, has been credited with essentially inventing the genre of science fiction. In 1896, he published The Island of Dr. Moreau, a novel about a mad scientist who creates terrible human-animal hybrids. The book foreshadows later work to transplant animal organs into humans and genetic engineering using genes taken from animals. In 1898, he published The War of the Worlds, about the invasion of the Earth by Martians. In the 20th century came the emergence of the UFO phenomenon, potentially indicating visitation of the Earth by non-human intelligences. Again, Wells foresaw this. And later, in 1914, Wells published a book called The World Set Free. What's interesting about The World Set Free is that it's seen as the first piece of fiction that depicts atomic bombs and a war employing them. Now, 1914 is the year of a conjunction of Saturn and Pluto, which tend to be harbingers of challenging episodes for humanity. The conjunctions of 1914 and 15 were the harbingers of the outbreak of World War I, of course. The Second World War broke out in 1939 at the waning square of the same cycle. And of course, that war saw the development and then use of real atomic bombs. So once again, Wells predicts something at a conjunction that then manifests later in the cycle initiated. He was clearly an artist with rare powers of prophecy, and I think it's worth studying his work in depth if we want to understand where the world might be heading. On that note, I can't help but think about Wells's novel, The Time Machine, which was published in 1895, and which of course depicts time travel. Will that be a possibility over the course of the 500-year Pluto-Neptune cycle that began around that time? But before we go, there's yet another extremely famous person whose life was foreseen in a creative work, and that's Elon Musk. Wernher von Braun was a German-American aerospace engineer who headed the United States' rocket and space programs and developed the Saturn V launch vehicle that brought Americans to the moon in 1969. Von Braun was a former SS officer imported into the United States as part of Project Paperclip, in which the US brought over thousands of Nazi scientists in a bid to retain technological advantage over the USSR. But von Braun also dabbled in writing, and in 1949 he wrote a science fiction book entitled Project Mars, a technical tale, which was about a human mission to Mars and their encounter with Martians on that planet. In the book, von Braun depicts a character who's the ruler of Mars, and he's called the Elon. And all this is all quite strange given the figure of Elon Musk, the world's richest man, who quite literally wants to send rockets to and colonize Mars. Now, von Braun wrote Project Mars at the time of another Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Leo, and this was around 1948, long before Elon Musk arrived on planet Earth. Elon was born on the 28th of June 1971 at 7:30 a.m. in Pretoria, South Africa. And if we look at his natal chart, we find Saturn and Pluto in pretty close aspect, just 4 degrees away from an exact trine. So once again, we find the depiction of a character in an artwork written at the time of a conjunction who then appears in the world later in that synodic cycle when the 2 planets reach a major aspect. This seems to indicate that von Braun had psychic ability. Now, something that the excellent dark journalist Daniel List has said repeatedly on his show is that von Braun's mother was a renowned psychic in Germany, and psychic ability is known to run in the family. Oh, and one last thing. Some people think that 9/11 was predicted by the writers of Back to the Future. And in the extended version of this video, available for World Astrology Report members, we explored that idea and the planetary cycle that timed the September the 11th attacks. This is crazy. You can watch that video by signing up as a member at worldastrologyreport.com. Members also get 20% off private consultations with me, and you can cancel at any time. Thanks, and see you next time.